Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy Skip, aka Curt, here from the video game Bang with my co-host Cory Benson. Say what up, Cory.
What's up, pizzas?
Hey, my man in the house with the pizza work.
Yes, sir, man. And we got a double dose this week of that Powers of X.
Like I told Cory earlier, I got the power. Man, it's about to be a powerful X. Cory with the background, Cory with the ad-libs.
Man, I just want to be a hype man. I don't want to be the guy who has to do all the rhymes. I like to be the guy who at the end of each verse just says the last couple words.
Hey, I think that's literally, like, what have you been doing all your life? That's obviously the perfect job and career for you. You've got to get that figured out. Just hype, man. That's it. Just bring the hype. Well, Jonathan Hickman brought the hype because he gave us powers back to back. He gave us powers of powers of 10 number 2 and powers of 10 number 3. We weren't with you last week because it was too powerful. We were like, hey, we're getting powers back to back, baby. So let's go ahead and just double down on it.
We need to take a minute to let the power wash over us and let the story unfold a little bit more. But I am kind of glad we did in some ways because of a lot of everything we've read so far. I kind of felt like 2 had like one really cool part, and then the rest was like, I don't know if we could have filled 30 minutes talking about that one.
Yeah, I think it probably would have been stretching it, and for me personally, not because it wasn't quality. It's just that there was kind of a healthy balance of setup and then execution. Set up a little bit more, and then bam, drop the hammer. So I think it's kind of perfect that it ended up this week, instead of it normally doing House of X, Powers of 10, House of X, Powers of 10, it did Powers of 10 2, Powers of 10 3. And that's perfect for us because we'll definitely be able to fill at least 30 minutes of convo on this. But before we jump all the way in, again, shout out to Oblivion Comics and Coffee for providing us with these books. These awesome books that we get to come and talk about to y'all. They are right down in downtown Sacramento, right across the street from the cathedral. So when you go in there, it's very important. This is the part y'all gotta stop whatever you're doing. You have to listen. I'm demanding your attention right now. When you walk in there, because you're going, right? If you can hear my voice, you're going. Jedi mind trick. Make sure you mention Video Game Bang or VGB. Drop those. You will get a discount, at least a 10% discount. And we got some pretty dope stickers in there right now as well. So if you say the code word, they're going to slip you the code sticker, and then bang, bang, you in the Video Game Gang. Cory's holding them up right now.
I love it. I'm holding them up as a visual reference right now because we're actually streaming this one live on Twitch.
Yes, we are. So for all the people that normally join us via podcast, thank you so much for tuning in on the podcast, whether it be through, all of them. We're on Stitcher, we're on Libsyn, we're on, pretty much everywhere. The iTunes, Google Play Store, all that stuff. Don't forget also, if you guys have, wait, Cory, are we on iHeartRadio as well?
I think we're everywhere. If we're not, we'll be there.
Yeah, but definitely check us out if you're on Spotify. Definitely check us out. Also, if you're on Pandora, because I think we were the first nerd culture video game podcast to even be on there, right?
Close to. Yeah, okay. Definitely the first indie. The rest were like the ones that got unlimited budgets and, huge stars. We were the first little indie team up in there representing. So, support indie, support your locals.
That's right. No clout, all hard work. You feel me? But exactly. Oblivion Comics and Coffee, thank you so much once again. Drop that code word, get the code sticker, join the Video Game Gang. Now.
Let's dig in, shall we?
Cory, talk to me. Powers of X number 2. What's happening?
So, Powers of X number 2 jumps all over the timeline. We get one crucial conversation to start off the book with Xavier and Magneto, because we know Magneto's on board, and we know how Professor X attained his new knowledge and how he wants to move forward, but we didn't actually get to see how it went down, how he approached Magneto and was able to convince him. So the first few panels we got here is just badassery, basically. It's always a good time when there's tension and you get Xavier and Magneto together, and then now he's armed with Moira with him to kind of reinforce his story. And Magneto drops some like baller stuff, basically saying there's no way, there's nothing you can do that's going to get us on the same side. I've heard it all before.
Right.
Our ideals are just too different. So unless you've really changed your perspective, we're not working together. And luckily, Xavier has really changed his perspective and mind zaps him. Basically, he says,
Yep.
"Trust me, bro. Take off the helmet." And he's like, "Nah, man. I'm yeah, right. You're just gonna fuck with me." And he says, "No, please, just I trust me here." And that's the beauty between the relationship. Bitter rivals, but at the same day, he took him at his word and was like, "All right, like I believe you." Took off the helmet, gets the download, and he's on board. So I thought it was a really cool thing. What were your big takeaways from that first scene?
The first scene hit me hard because their relationship and how close they are goes back. If you want to talk about frenemies, like they're even past that. You know what I mean? Like they are literally brothers in arms, and they have the same level of dedication to seeing the prosperity of mutants and the survival of mutants occur. But they just, when it comes to their ideals, kind of like, obviously there's a model and the parallel of Professor X being like Martin Luther King, being the non-violent, but will risk his life and put his life and anyone else who's willing to make that sacrifice on the line to see justice served and to see change made. And then you have Magneto, who is more modeled after Malcolm X, while he was still in the Nation of Islam. Very much where Malcolm X was very racist against white people. Um, you have Magneto, who's very, what is that, like, it can't, genocidal? Is that how you would
He's
describe it?
definitely, yeah,
He's a
genocidal, more
genicist.
militant. Like
Yeah.
he's definitely not as he doesn't let stuff slide.
No, not
He'll
at
take a
all. So
life.
he will take a life, and that's his whole thing. Instead of, we shouldn't have to give our lives. We are homo superior. They should be giving their lives to us. We should be taking their lives. So where their ideals clash is where they break, but they never have any less respect for each other throughout that whole time. So for us to know that they are on the same page earlier on in the book, and then for us to see how they became or came to be on the same page, for me, was paramount. And something about Jonathan Hickman, like one of his tropes, if you will, and I don't mean that in a negative way, is he does a little bit of what Quentin Tarantino does with some nonlinear storytelling.
Yeah. We're
Like,
getting a
and
lot of that in this series.
a lot, because they're playing around with time and different timelines and different lives and different lifelines. So we got the non-linear storytelling happening. So what I like about that is where normally you would just show the progression and it's kind of like okay, I'm taking note of that. With him, it's like, hey, this has already happened. What? They're on the same page. And oh, by the way, this is how it happened. And then it's more of like oh. And
Yeah.
it makes you a little more invested. So I think that this scene was obviously massively important. And I like the fact that how Professor Xavier, was at the end, like basically Magneto is telling him, hey, if you try to trick me, I'm on you. B, if I see you falter in your resolve, I'm
Yeah.
on you. And I just love how Charles was like, friend,
That's what exactly what I wanted.
right.
That's a
But,
yeah.
but he also said, but friend, for once, trust me.
Yeah.
That was his simple thing as he put out his hand. And I was just like, perfection.
So this was for those keeping track at home, X0, so year 1 technically. And
Yep.
then the next one we bounce into is back into year 10. And this is where the whole story started. And this is I mean, this is where I feel the main storyline is currently.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel about that right now because we're getting so many timelines and like although they all kind of coexist, I've been kind of attaching myself to this one as okay, this has got to be kind of the main storyline. But we get a pretty cool scene now with year 10 Xavier with
Hmm.
Cyclops and all dripped out in white Magneto.
Right.
And what was the point of this one? What did you take away from that?
Oh, wait, scene was this? What scene was this
So
specifically?
this was the scene basically they're
Like
trying
right
to
after?
Yeah, this is right after that, and um, Nimrod is kind of targeted at this point because we haven't seen this year 10 squad talk about Nimrod or anything. We've only seen what appears to be the aftermath in year 100 when shit's not looking too good. And so in
Hmm.
this one, basically, they're coming up with the plan, and he brings up Nimrod on the big screen, and one of my favorite panels is just Cyclops saying, "Oh, damn!" Like
That
that's what
was
we're
pretty
dealing
good.
with here.
I was digging that scene. And it's funny now circling back around to Powers of 10 2. After reading Powers of 10 3, I'm like, I think I know. I won't say, like, just don't let me forget, Corey. I won't say what I think is going on here until we get to Powers of 10 3. But I'll just tell you what I liked about this scene since you asked. The main thing was just seeing Slim, seeing Scott Summers return back to his, like, I'm a lieutenant, standpoint. Like, whatever you guys need, I'm executing. Like, you guys need those guys dead, they're done. You guys need me to get this data, it's done. You guys need me to mop the floor, it's mopped. I just liked seeing him return to his identity because I think, as pivotal as a role and as iconic as Cyclops was when we were all growing up, throughout the years of the X-Men continuity just being battered and tattered, he has been someone who has kind of lost himself the most. So to see him just so sure and so resolute in the directions and instructions that they're kind of pointing him to was really awesome. And I think what adds to that is, as we are finding out, we're that's the thing about Jonathan Hickman. The characters know their roles. It's us who is discovering. So as he is revealing stuff to us, one of the reasons I believe that everybody's so resolute and so at peace is because, just like Charles showed Xavier, like what Moira showed him, I think he did that to all of his main people. So all of them don't question what they need to do in any way. Even Marvel Girl, aka Jean Grey, in the first issue, when we saw her, like, you could see there was nothing but peace and, like, oneness on her face. So that's where I
Yeah,
took primarily from this scene.
a continuation of what we saw him too, because like the most tense situation I think we've seen Cyclops in so far was that standoff with the Fantastic Four, and he
Yes.
held his ground. He gave, he ultimately gave in a little bit, but without losing his power of saying, like, we'll hammer this out later. And
Right.
he, just kind of
Exactly.
dipped out. I could tell this means a lot to you guys. Is I think was his quote.
I love that line.
Yeah,
That
I can tell
was
this is
so good.
important to you guys. We'll be back to deal with this later. So
Exactly. So,
the
but
next one
yep. Go ahead.
goes into my favorite part of this comic book, which was kind of a call to arms from Apocalypse. So, it was alluded to that Apocalypse was around and stuff in Life 9, I think, of Moira. And he kind of shows up here with his new horsemen. I don't think at this point we know exactly that they're, horsemen of Apocalypse, but we see that he's on the same side as Wolverine, which was a little jarring to me because I've always seen Apocalypse as just the main villain guy. So to see him, with this new squad and just the panel that meant I thought was the coolest to see was he says, "This is a promise whose guarantee is assured, for I will lead you." And I think it's this one right here. And I
Yep.
just thought it was really cool because now I'm like, wow, like we've just got, Apocalypse saying he's going to lead Wolverine into battle in basically a suicide mission that everyone's freaking out about. But, like what bigger gun can you have going into this fight than Apocalypse leading you?
Not very many. And I think this also, because I think you and I maybe had shared them. I'm not entirely, oh no, it was another conversation I was having. We took a look at all of the covers of all the books that the culmination of the storyline is going to splinter off into. And one of them, it wasn't Marauders, I believe it's Excalibur. And in that group, Apocalypse is there, and everybody was like, there's no way that he stays there that long. Like, something must happen with him in the first issue because it's Apocalypse. But now reading this and seeing how dire the situation was in order for him to have to be a part of this makes sense, and he may stick around longer because, like I said, and I mentioned this to my buddy Tom earlier, formerly of the Capeless Crusaders and currently of Nerd On Podcast. I told him, I said, this is not an X-Men comic book yet. This is gonna spin off into an X-Men comic book. X-Men #1 is coming. This is not an X-Men book. This is a mutant book. House of X and Powers of 10 are two mutant books, because before we can kick off the X-Men, we have Jonathan Hickman established we need to bring mutants back into the main stage. So guess what Apocalypse is? He's considered mutant number
The
one.
first one. Yeah.
The first of them. So to me, that's how dire it is that someone who's the first, and if we think Magneto is extreme, they're like Magneto is what was the Dave Chappelle quote? Tom Brady makes who was so I make Malcolm X look, I make so and so look like Malcolm. Oh, Tom Brady makes Bryant Gumbel look like Malcolm X.
Oh, Wayne Brady.
Wayne Brady, not Tom Brady.
Yeah,
That's the quarterback.
okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's what
right.
it is here. Like, Apocalypse makes Magneto look like Bryant Gumbel. It's a flip because Apocalypse is way more extreme. Like, whereas Magneto wants to see mutants thrive, and he made that quote in House of X #1, "You have new gods now." Apocalypse has felt like that since like day 2.
Yeah.
So they need this person who rages against them to lead them, because that's how dire things are in year 100 for the X-Men,
Yeah.
X3. My favorite quote, I know I'm rambling on, but my favorite quote is actually this one. I'll hold it up to the screen. It's this panel right here where I believe her name is Scylla Bell. I know the red one. Scylla Bell and Percival aren't home. Okay, no, so Scylla Bell is one of the ones that got caught, but the blue one and the red one, who looks like Nightcrawler, they're in the panel, and Apocalypse says, "Give me your eyes, children. For this, I would have sacrificed all of you. It means that much." I was just like,
why you gotta say that? Even if it's true, you don't say that.
You don't say that, Apocalypse.
I know,
You're leading
bro.
the wrong way.
You got it in your hands. You don't need to tell us now that this means more than all of your lives, basically.
but at the same time, like, that's for them to have no illusions about the times that they are in. And it even, I'll let us naturally progress to the other part. But what's nice about that is it's set, like, as you're kind of, hinting to with your tone, like, that's just mean, it's rude, and it feels insensitive, like you don't care. But it's actually quite the opposite, because any good leader who would ask someone to give their life would also be one of the first to offer up theirs. And later on down the line, that notion comes into play.
Yeah. So basically we lay the groundwork on what these things are and why they're so important. So this piece, this little USB drive for, us to understand is
Right.
not even like filled with information. It's like a decoder. And all the machines are interested in is collecting information and data. And a lot of times that's what they're doing to people. They're like just turning them into data and absorbing their like life force and knowledge into this giant database.
The
And
bath.
so basically everything that's ever existed is in their database. And that's a lot of information. Like they're saying, it's like the ultimate needle in a haystack. And so they need a part of information, which gets revealed later. But so what he's holding when he says it's more important isn't even the information, it's a decryptor. And now that there's another part. So because then we cut to Nimrod, who has a couple humans with him, who basically alert him that what they got away with. And he, gets pissed off and says some cool shit and basically disintegrates them. I thought that was a cool couple little panels, but it basically was just to say, like, he's aware now of what they're kind of going for. He knows they have it, and he's a little shook.
Yeah, he was very much shook. I don't want to say very much. It was a little, because Nimrod doesn't ever show very much. I don't want to say doesn't ever, but it's rare that he will begin to show very much emotion. He wants to, maintain the same countenance and ultimately, be seen as the overlord that he is. But that scene was good. It definitely served the purpose of more than anything. You have to have those establishing shots, like Vader choking homeboy, you know what I mean? Like you got to show how
Yeah.
sinister people are. And that more or less, it did push the story along a little more, but it established the character that is Nimrod. Of course, after that, again the group who did get back with the USB drive that is the decoder, kind of bringing it back to Wolverine and bringing it back to North, who is like as Corey even reminded me earlier, because I was like, I thought that was Magneto, but apparently it's one of the Chimera who is built off of Matt.
Mr.
Hmm.
Mr. Sinister's experiments. He's like a Gen 2 mutant.
Yep.
So he's a mix of Emma Frost and I guess Polaris would be
Yeah.
the two he's a mix of, and Polaris was Magneto's daughter. So
Wait, granddaughter, right?
that's
Is it
I
daughter or
think so. So
granddaughter?
relative. And
Yeah.
so that's why he feels
Exactly.
the urge to don the Magneto stuff. Just like they're trickling information to us. It's so hard to do a podcast around a comic book that jumps around so much because one thing we don't know is what happens to Magneto in this universe yet, or we actually haven't seen it yet. So maybe it's a tribute because he went down a hero or something like that. Those are things I'm sure we'll find out in future comic book
I
panels. But yeah, I think
Yep.
I was with you. I thought that was Magneto. It was until I was just reading it a second time and going online to look stuff up till I found that out.
Yep, exactly. And then of course that leads in. Ultimately, they're talking about how it's not information; it is a decryptor, and what it can do or is show us the location or show them the location of the information that they actually do want to access within Nimrod's compound. And of
Yeah.
course, Logan being there, he's just kind of talking a little bit about how it's a suicide mission, and but we still have to take the stand. And then that's where Corey's favorite panel comes in about yes, this needs to get done, and and this is a promise I'm guaranteeing that I will lead you, ultimately guaranteeing success. After that, we have a diagram. Jonathan Hickman, known for his graphic design, comes in and he's talking about Nimbus and Nubaru. I'm not going to jump into that too much, not because I don't think it's important, because it is important, but it's not something that I think is, obviously it didn't get revealed even within the last two comics. So this is something that we'll probably table and refer to later. Past that, it jumps over into year 1000. So X3, X to the third power. Now, this is something that's interesting, Corey. As you were talking, obviously I'm kind of throwing my eyes back and forth through the issue to kind of gain, my bearings. And I realized that Nimrod is still present
Yeah.
in the generation of ascendancy. Just kind of did that ever like really profoundly come into your mind that as they're battling Nimrod, they don't eradicate him, although they may or may not defeat him?
Yeah, it seems like because we knew that this little orb guy that was following the blue guy, which I don't think we know who that is. That Xavier?
We don't know yet.
We don't know who this blue guy is yet, looking to ascendancy, but I did know that that little guy was Nimrod, and I didn't really think of the implications of it. It does seem like he's subservient now in
Hmm.
this current state. Like he doesn't appear to be a threat anymore, but yeah, it is pretty cool to see that the ultimate surviving adjusting machine has adjusted. And sometimes when like I think it was another comic book where what's the guy's name who Darwin, the only way Darwin could adjust to Incredible Hulk was like running away or something, like so, so there comes a point when you're evolving to survive where you don't evolve to defeat, you evolve to, survival is survival. So,
Right.
maybe that's why he's in this form. There's no way he could uprise or in his algorithm it just says, "Hey, you need to serve if you're going to survive."
Straight up.
So that's I think pretty cool, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of justifies why he's in the role he is in X to the third.
I agree. And then past that, we we see the blue guy who we are not sure, but this is the age of ascendancy, and there is a church of ascendancy, and basically he's talking about normally, and I'm going to quote it actually. Normally, civilizations of our maturity only attract universal predators. This is because the perceived value of this system is found in its celestial resources and not its living culture. Our system is a place to be mined, not preserved. And he's basically talking about this as we see that there is a threat, like a black cloud, kind of looming and making progress towards the position of that person as he's surrounded by what looks like a bunch of either guards, additional priests, and some technological information orbs, and then ultimately, they're saying like, hey, it seems they had tried something, I guess, like in the past that would go out to this thing and maybe defer it, and they're asking like, hey, did the scheme that you used works? And then he's like, basically, we're about to find out, and it's crazy. We see through the ether this black cloud ultimately starts to come together and takes somewhat of a human form, if you will.
I was
And
thinking
we
Galactus when I first saw it.
Because it
It's
looked
like,
like that with the headpiece.
yeah, they put like a very Galactus style headpiece on him, but it seems like he's a very, very more, especially because I mean we skipped over it and like we should. Like I don't think we should go through all these charts and stuff, but basically what it breaks down is the types of societies
Mhm.
and intelligence. And so it starts with like a basic computer. And so, at its base level in entity. And then once you get basically the equivalent of 100,000, it becomes this. And then at a million,
Mhm.
it becomes a phalanx. And then once you get to the fullest form, you're, what is it? Ascension or whatever. So that's the goal. That's what you're looking to do. And so this giant cloud creature thing is there to maybe judge them and then make a decision on whether it was a success, and then they become absorbed into this world mind, whatever. Or it's a whole nother level of shit I never even thought about. What explain it to me.
Yes. So I was so happy when I saw this because this was like one of the coolest things to me when I used to watch the cartoon. And I like, but this is just Hickman again, just rolling through the hits and bringing all the good stuff back. When I saw who they were and I saw the word, it's the phalanx. The phalanx is they almost think like if for the Star Trek people out there, Corey, you Star Trek any?
Very,
No?
very little.
Okay, but are you familiar with the Borg?
Yeah,
Okay,
the big
think of the
square,
phalanx. Yeah, so
the
think of
big
the
cube.
phalanx at the as the Borg. You
Okay.
assimilate or you don't survive. Assimilate, assimilate. So no wonder. Now I'm starting to think as we're talking, if Nimrod was crunching the numbers and found that the only way for him to survive was to become subservient to something that eventually becomes more than him, he probably also crunched the numbers of things that might be able to consume this thing that's currently in front of him, and he probably crunched the numbers on the phalanx. He might have been counting on the phalanx to come, because the phalanx doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're stronger than the phalanx, as long as the phalanx like basically outnumbers you or outweighs you or gets around you, it'll absorb you and you will assimilate. You will become the phalanx. And that was kind of part of what they were talking about in the diagram. But
Yeah.
what I love is once we find out it's the phalanx and they're talking and they're like, we phalanx ate your world mine. They fought for sovereignty and lost, but we phalanx saw the whispering gods behind it. We phalanx have heard your message. Now hear ours. What do you seek? And then you just see one of the blue people just look and say, Ascension. And then you see the rest of the phalanx clouds start to come down on their city. And I was just like, what is this ascension? What? I need to know. I need to know. Dude,
And
oh my
luckily,
gosh. Hmm.
they don't tell us a more goddamn thing in
Nope.
issue 3.
Nope.
Because
Because
I
you
was
got to
I
keep
was
reading.
that's exactly like, so that's why I was starting saying like Powers 2 ended up giving us some cool parts. It gave us, the part with Magneto, and then at the end it takes us further into the future we've ever seen, and who knows when we're going to get back to that point. But now we kind of at least see, as far as this timeline goes, the furthest out we've gotten to see yet. Now we just got a lot of holes to fill, and I actually think overall, I really like 2. I think it was probably the weakest overall that we've seen, because one thing, after, a long time of hearing you review comic books,
Hmm.
it always just feels nice when you have a clean beginning, middle, and end, and each one's kind of like, self-contained, and this one felt
Hmm.
like it wasn't. If I were just to read this book, I'd be so confused and lost and have no idea what the hell was going on. So on that kind of basis,
Yep.
it was good overall, but probably the weakest so far of the series for
Word.
me.
For me, I would actually currently put Powers of 10 number 1 as the weakest for me personally, and then I would put this one as number 2. Powers of 10 number 3 to me is the best one of the Powers of 10 series so far. And I agree, like, if you like, this is not one where you could step in and although for a story, like an isolated comic book itself, I do feel like it has a strong beginning. I feel like where they started with the comic was perfect. I feel like the middle where they went made sense, and I feel like the end was a really great ending. But yeah, straight up, if you haven't read any of the rest of the series and you stepped in on this, you will not be able to follow along. So I definitely, if we're gonna take a notch away, I agree with Corey. I'll take the notch away on that. But I did really enjoy it, and I am totally bought into this storyline because from Powers of 10 number 1, where we know that this is the ascended period and we know that this is far beyond like the main storyline of House of X. The main thing that I loved is that like they're talking in all this advancement, and then they go and they show these humans, and it's 2 nude humans, a man and a woman, in a garden, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the Garden of Eden. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like they're piggybacking off of Magneto saying you have new gods now, and then literally in the future they ascended past them to the point where the humans look at them like gods, and they even have them in a Garden of Eden type setting. So I was really
Yeah.
bought into that. But as we wrap this up, because we got Powers of 10-3 to talk about, I want to end it on the last page that it ends on, actually. It's a quote. It says, "You must see by now there is no you and I. There is only us. We are together or we are nothing." Professor Xavier.
Leave it to Professor X, man, dropping those bombs.
Dropping the
The quotes
knowledge
in this thing are
bombs.
amazing. They usually the quote at the beginning and the ends of the books are all like those should be tattooed on your body. Like
And
they're so good.
it's so funny that you mentioned that, and they are, and that was one of the biggest callbacks to Jonathan Hickman and Nick Dragata's comic, their indie comic East of West, that I love, because East of West always starts and ends the same way. Like it always starts with the profound quote, it always ends with the profound quote, and it keeps the same quote on the front of each and every book too. So
Nice.
I just love those things. But anyway, so that closes the chapter, pun intended, on Powers of 10 number 2. Powers of 10 number 3. Corey, Corey.
This one is a lot more linear. It
Mm-hmm.
does tell like a very consistent part of the story, and it almost entirely takes place in X to the second year 100.
Yes, and it is action packed. This
Yeah.
is probably the most action we've seen since what, House of X number 2? I mean, excuse me, House of X number 1, when it was Mystique and Sabretooth and Toad, like, running from the Fantastic Four.
That's right. Actually, I didn't even think about it in those terms. And this has been a really cerebral comic book. You expect,
Hmm.
punches every panel, but the crazy action sequences and fighting has been pretty far and few between. So yeah, as far as that's concerned, we get our biggest epic fight in this one. And it starts off really weird. Like I had to look at these panels kind of a lot. Um, it starts with this dude. I don't even know if who this guy is or if it matters, but he's like some sort of priest, obviously, based off of what he's wearing and how he's talking. They're like in a church, and he's holding up a baby. And this little orb ball thing comes and seemingly like burns half its face off. Uh, I,
So I'm going to interject real quick. So that like what the closest thing that is to me, like I agree, that's like a priest type thing. I don't know what he really is, but the baby he took remember he's amongst humans in there. So that Garden of Eden type thing, that's like deeper into it where they keep because they basically have the humans caged. So he
Yeah.
goes down there, he grabs a human baby, and as he's talking, that ore ball that like looks like it burns the baby, that actually is what if you look more into like pictures of the phalanx, that's what it looks like after the phalanx like absorbs you and brings you in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is he doing? Like, is he turning the human baby into a machine
Hmm.
or mutant? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, he's
Is it like
basically
a
yeah,
baptism?
think of it like a baptism slash him just brandishing his power.
Okay.
Just reaffirming. You know how I to just to bring it up, like back in the day, like especially during like the slavery day. Yep, there goes the panel. So back during the slavery days, just to show the power, like to almost kind of emasculate the men who were known as protectors and to like make the women fear. They would take the woman from the man, they would hang the woman upside down, they try to find a pregnant woman, and they would just cut their stomach open and just let the baby fall out. And it was just basically a way of saying, we control you from life to death, your men can do nothing, we are superior. And that's what
Okay.
it seems like they're doing too. It's just a brandishing of power, but instead of cutting the baby out, take the baby and then transform it into something else right in front of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Sick,
that was
sick and twisted.
pleasant.
Yep. Yeah.
That was, yeah, super pleasant. But what we get is I don't think they have busted in there. Have they? They make like a huge entrance. Yeah, and then what we got is Zorn, North. Um, oh man, what's and who are the other two? Who's red?
Uh,
Like
his name is Cardinal. I don't know what
Rasputin.
Rasputin. That's who it is. There you go. You got
Yes.
it.
Yeah, and then we get a little diagram of basically the only two crews left, and we have Apocalypse, who we saw in the last one with his horsemen, which we didn't know at the time. I think that they were actual horsemen of the apocalypse, but
Right.
that's just that was part of his contract. Apocalypse is
Mhm.
like, if you're bringing me in, I get four horsemen. One of them gets to be Wolverine for sure. So he gets
Right.
Wolverine as war, Zorn is death, of course. The Nihilist is death.
Yeah.
Pestilence was North, and then Famine was Krakoa, or and which we find out based off this chart is like a mix or a hybrid of Krakoa itself and Cypher,
Cipher.
who we saw in issue 1 of House
House
of
of.
X.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then of course we got the other team, which the interesting thing is we know who the players are, but one of these people has not been formally introduced yet, and that is because it looks like they're no longer existing. So we have Sila Bell, who was the black brain telepath who we saw in Powers of 10 #1, who ended up getting captured, and she was the one that got put in the bath by Nimrod to break her
Yep.
down into raw data.
Yep.
We got Rasputin, of course, who is a hybrid between Squire, Rasputin, maybe Wolfsbane. It looks like Kitty Pryde, and I don't know who Kenny is. It's basically she's a third generation Chimera from the the Sinister experiments, and
Yep.
then Cardinal, who Kurt Wagner, of course. So he's a hybrid of one of the of Nightcrawler. I don't know which Gray he was taken from, but I guess obviously Jean Grey, who probably is more of a pacifist character as well. And I don't know who Freeman is, but he's more of a priest, or also a priest. And then Mutant, he's third generation Chimera. And then Percival was also one of the other ones who had got caught. He was a mutant pureblood. But Mother, Akaba, the mutant pureblood, we don't see Mother. Like in
No.
the everybody that's in white is no longer with us. They're either maybe the perforated white means they're dead, and maybe the hardline white means they're just missing.
That's what I was thinking, because the outline ones, we definitely know that those people are off the map. This Mother character, we have a whole different classification for with just the hard white outline, so it'll be interesting. I'm sure doesn't seem like there's been very many accidents in this book so far, so I'm guessing that means something, and we'll find out in the next, in the run.
Right. So past that, we had the next scene, which was Nimrod looking at a bunch of data, and I forget the character's name, but she's Nimrod's right hand Man, right hat woman. The Church of Ascendancy is on fire. So she's just talking about how that whole crew just stormed the gates, basically. And Nimrod's like, this is a lesser issue. I don't even know why you're telling me this. You see that I'm working. You should be able to snuff this out and deal with it. This does not require my efforts, let alone my attention. And
He calls
mhm,
it. He calls the shot immediately. He's like, "This is either like a distraction, and they got something else, or it's got to be this other case." Because he's a freaking supercomputer, so he's already ran all the probabilities and has it narrowed down to these two things. And either way, he's like, "I don't need to be concerned with this."
straight up. Now, I do want to call something out because between RB Silva, who does the RB Silva's doing this book, and then Pepe Larraz, who does House of X, I always felt like the House of X art was superior to, inconsiderably superior to the Powers of 10 art. But the way that he has Nimrod in here with his whole, see-through screen and everything, like, is incredible. Like, I definitely feel like the art has been taking steps up with each issue, and this one I feel like is easily the best art that RB Silva has done. So this feels more on par with the art of House of X and Pepe Larraz. So that's another thing. I just wanted to call that out because that was a big criticism of everybody. Everybody was like, well, the thing about Powers of 10, outside of it being even more of like a larger concept story, is that the art is not as good. And I feel like they listened and they probably went back and maybe went over some of this stuff again just to make it that much sharp. So just wanted to give that call out. My favorite part about this, honestly, of the whole thing outside of Nimrod totally being Nimrod, is when she was just like, suit yourself, and she just jumps and goes and like flies. And I just really love that panel. It's just super dope. It's just a
Yeah,
well done panel with like a little jetpack on her back.
suit yourself, bounce.
Bounce. What about you, Corey? How you feeling about that section and what comes next?
So I think we covered that part pretty well. I liked how he was just in control of at all times. Like he knew that he basically didn't know the details of what they were planning, but he kind of in a roundabout way alluded to what it was going to be. And so
Right.
then we get to the fight, and we get to see back at that church, and basically they're wrecking everybody there. Um, but then until the Sentinels kind of all show up, and then it kind of goes downhill pretty fast.
Yeah, real fast. So her and we'll find the name of the character later, but ultimately she shows up, and then like you said, as Nimrod is still there, like tending to his business, and before we jump there, there is a small scene where it does show the pacifism, but also the desperation of Cardinal as he drives a sword through one of the opponents, one of the opposition. And he's just talking about how, like, I'm a pacifist who's been pushed to the brink, but even for those like me, there comes a time when a point must be made. So that's pretty cool. And then after that, that's when you see the main lady who was talking to, oh, and that's they were talking about mutant god. So I guess the opposition views her as a god, and that was something that I picked up on, but we didn't really get to talk about too much. And but ultimately, as that scene occurs, and we see that there's going to be a showdown between the last four who were there, and then the Sentinels and that character. We move over to the fact that Wolverine, Apocalypse, and I forget the tree monster's name. Who's that? The group character.
I think he's just Krakoa.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's right. I think that is Krakoa because it was dope that later in the line he was able to open himself up as a portal. Oh yeah,
Yep.
because yeah, so that's Cypher and Krakoa together as
So
they have merged.
basically, Krakoa, from what we learned in the first one, is like the land itself, which has like sentient properties, and the only person who could, they said, interface with it, to get it to do what other people wanted it to do, was Cypher. We don't know what happened to Cypher and Krakoa, but this entity of him is basically a living hybrid of the two. So this is basically if Krakoa had Wi-Fi or was like wireless. This is
Yep.
like he can go out beyond. He's got 5G capabilities to where he can make portals back, to the main Krakoa and stuff. If that even exists, we're not even fully sure. But yeah, this is a sentient version of Krakoa that can interface with humans using Cipher somehow.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, don't forget that in Powers of 10 number 1, Cardinal planted a he planted a seed and it grew hecka fast, and it was a portal for them to get out of there. So it still seems like, maybe on a more advanced level, as long as there's still that twin flower, that they can still go back and forth between different places. And
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that little scene. Yeah.
right, and between Krakoa being essentially a sentient, like island or entity, and then with Cypher being like having high technopathy to where he can advance and adapt and everything. I'm sure that how powerful Krakoa is has probably been consolidated, being that they had to join. So it's probably taken properties from both to be that much more effective and that much more of a resource.
Yeah. So we got two battle scenes or two instances happening right now. One clearly seems to be a distraction going on at the church. And then we go to the espionage of Krakoa and Wolverine together. Um, Krakoa is got the flash drive we were talking about from issue 2, and they're going to try and get into there to decrypt the information that is important to them, which I don't know if this is a big reveal later, but we might as well discuss it now. Basically, what they're trying to do is find when Nimrod was activated.
Yeah, when he
That
went
is,
online, like Skynet,
yeah,
basically.
exactly. And we were talking about how this is a giant database of everything that's ever happened everywhere, which is a lot. So now they have the decoder to find out exactly where that's at. So they cause one big distraction at the church while the other squad is going to get that information.
Big time. So, as Corey mentioned, as Nimrod was doing his work, his systems go off, alert, alert, and now he has to spring into action. So it's funny to see. Not that I can't call it a full mistake, but it's funny to see a miscalculation in Nimrod's computing.
It wasn't. I don't think it was a miscalculation at all,
You don't
because
think
when he
so?
was running, when he was talking to her, he said, I can't remember what it was. It's either this or some other agenda, or
Right.
and both of which he's ready to deal with. And then when he
But
starts getting the alerts, go ahead.
Oh, but yeah, both he put him on the table. But if he really had made the proper calculation, and you know how Nimrod is, he would have
That's
went
true.
to the source of what it was to deal with it
Yeah,
before it turns into anything more.
yeah. But him staying back, he ends up, he sees, oh, it's alert. What is this? Ah, some other agenda indeed. So it was his other option, which he couldn't necessarily account for because it could have literally been anything. But he probably put it together pretty quick that this now it's important. I got to get the hell out of this cool, digital room.
Right. So we go and we see. Now this is some of the coolest stuff because I really love light. And we have some of the coolest lighting in here as we see Krakoa slash Cypher, say, hey, we got it. And it's this sort of crystal thing. Of course, Wolverine, like, you can't have someone coming and Wolverine detect them without a sniff sniff word bubble.
Iconic.
Like, iconic. Show him, Corey. There we go.
Yeah, right there.
Sniff sniff. There's something not quite
Mm.
right. So of course, Nimrod approaches and he comes in with the bang and a boom.
I was gonna say
Um,
approaches. That is an entrance right there, man. He just
yep.
threw a one big Kamehameha right through the door. It's like when you see people, use their small attacks. It's like, why didn't you use the big one first? He used the big one first. He ripped
He's
right through. Wolverine is pretty much out the fight
Yeah,
immediately.
immediately. Yeah, Wolverine is reduced to having however much of his body is left, and he's going through his healing process. And we see adamantium and like a little like a little sping, a little sparkle even off of his forehead. My forehead does that too when I don't wear hats. That's a whole nother story though. And then what do we have after that, Corey?
So then we cut back to the church where they're not doing too much better. It looks like we got Cardinal is incapacitated. And it's just this red woman who was earlier called a god, looking at Rasputin, and Zorn, who's pretty much out the fight too. And Rasputin, she's badass. This is the character I want to know the most about, I think, going forward. And I'm assuming with how much of a push they're giving her is maybe a character we'll see outside of this storyline. Like, I'm pretty sure she'll get a lot more down the road based off of just how badass she looks. I think there's just going to be a demand to get more of her. But
I agree.
anyways, it comes to like a little bit of chicken where Rasputin's like, all right, what are you going to do? And uh I kind of don't understand what this big blast at the end was. So you're going to have to break that one down for me.
So Zorn. being the nihilist that Zorn is, has a singularity inside of the mask. So basically, it's like a failsafe. Like worst come to worst, I can, almost like the cyanide pill that the Nazis would keep like in
Oh,
their
okay.
tooth. So it's basically like, or even like if we want to take it back to '89 or Batman or whatever, how you try, or whatever Batman it was, you try to take Batman's masks off and you get zapped. So and basically that character, the red character, was trying to call Rasputin's bluff. Like, you're not going to pull it as much. The only thing you guys care about and the only thing that drives you is hope, and you're just going to give all that up in one moment. I don't think so. And then Rasputin is like, you know what? You're right. I don't know. And then that's when the red lady's like, no, and he's like, let's find out. So Zorn's
Yeah.
mask comes off, and look, and what's funny about it, Corey? Look at this. I don't know if you look down.
He's smiling under there.
He got
I
what
know
he wanted.
exactly. He cares about nothing,
Nothing,
Curtis.
nothing,
He cares about
Lebowski,
nothing.
nothing. We're nihilists. We
I'll
care
pull
about
off my
nothing.
mask.
I pull off my mask.
Yeah, no, so he's eating it up. This is what he's
Yeah.
been living for.
So
Was to,
Zorn gets his Uli on real quick.
yeah.
For the Big Lebowski fans out there who are listening to the podcast, you will hear Big Lebowski references from time to
That
time.
sick smile, man. He believes in nothing.
Nothing, Krakoacast, nothing. So after that, then I love the panel that we get put back to. We get Nimrod just getting knocked through a bunch of bricks, and then you just see Apocalypse just roll up like to Logan, like, here, take this. And then Logan's trying to be tough, like, I'm still gonna stay, I'm still gonna fight. Apocalypse is like, you would know how foolish and stupid you sound if you could see yourself. Half of your body is not even like there.
Yeah. This is
Then
a
we
badass showdown too, because Nimrod
Oh
seems to have
man.
like divided himself, and it's
Oh yeah.
just this giant unscathed Apocalypse about to throw down in the biggest fight we could have had in this timeline.
So here's
And
my callback that I ask you to remind me about. And before we jump into that, I don't want to leave this out. We do see Cypher/Krakoa open themselves up, and then you see a portal. I don't know if that's a bunch of different planets or bubbles, but the portal has been opened up to somewhere for Logan to pass through and be able to get to where he needs to. Well, actually, we do know where the portal ultimately ends up going, but after we get that, then yes, we see Apocalypse, and then we see Nimrod split off into 3 or 4 different entities. And I want to point out the callback that I said about how he said, I would have risked any of your lives for this, like no questions asked. When Wolverine, not that Wolverine couldn't have given his life, but the whole point is the mission. So once Apocalypse sees that Wolverine can no longer fight, but he can still be a crucial part of the mission, he gives himself first and lets Wolverine go. As a good leader would. I ask your life and I would risk your life for it, but if it came down to it, and I had to risk my life for someone else to complete the mission, I go first.
that's a good point, because he could have just dipped himself and got out of there, but he saw the better option was to create a full distraction, because at this point Nimrod doesn't really know what the plan is, and we don't either. But yeah, so he stays and basically takes the losing fight so that jacked up Wolverine can take the portal and get out of there.
Sorry, indeed. Well, I know this is the part that you were pretty psyched on, so I'll let you talk about the fight a little bit more.
No, it was just badass. Like every single panel, jaw dropping. Like Nimrod put Apocalypse to work and ends up like just talking shit the whole time. He's like, Apocalypse, the mutant immortal, older than the world, the fittest of all. How sad this must be to know that natural selection has brought you here. And it ends basically with him losing that fight. And
Well, hold on, Corey. Hold
well,
on. You
okay,
might be jumping the gun, my friend.
okay.
Did he lose that? Did he lose the fight, or did we just stop on a plano when he was in a disadvantaged position?
Well, knowing what we see, there's not much to give us belief that he's gonna win that fight, but it's one of those, like, he definitely has taken the L in the battle, but his sacrifice is what's gonna win the war.
Okay.
So I think in that way, he does lose this fight based off that
Okay.
last panel. Like he's, mouth open, like getting his face squeezed. Like this is the Mountain versus the Red Viper right here. He's about to pretty much see his end. But the next panel is what makes it okay, which is we get Wolverine going where he's going, pretty much healed up already, meeting up with Moira with the diamond or crystal that Apocalypse gave him.
Mm.
And basically, uh, this is it. This is what they needed. This is the thing that they were looking for. They have it. This is when Nimrod came online. This world is basically lost, is what we realize, which I thought, which was crazy because I'd always thought that this timeline was the future of X2. Or is this X2? Yeah.
This,
Zero,
yeah,
one,
this
two.
is,
So
yeah.
I thought 2 was like a future of 1 basically, and that this was all one linear lifetime that we were looking at. But we get the big swerve in this one when Wolverine seems to do this a lot, but he has to heroically kill a woman. Straight up X-Men 3 style, what he did to Phoenix
Yep.
in the movie. But
Hmm.
we know what happens when Moira dies. She moves forward to the next life with information. So this world is lost. They just Zorn just lit off a black hole. Apocalypse just got his face crushed, and now all did it for this. And now he ends up plunging his claws right through Moira to send her into life number 10. So turns out this was just Moira's life number 9 the whole time. It wasn't even part. So this was the past, technically.
Technically, well, I'm not going to get into. I mean, I think we're all still recovering from how time travel works in Endgame, which I'm
Yeah.
gonna again reiterate. I think it was the most genius thing to contradict what each person said, because one person would say time travel works like this, the other person would say time travel works like that, and I love the fact that they used the simple truth as a a plot device. We don't know how time travel works because we can't.
Yeah.
So everybody could be right and everybody could be wrong. I love how they left that up to interpretation. Of course, we have at the end, and so ended the 9th life of Moira X. Now, the interesting thing is that it's not Moira McTaggart, it's Moira
Mm.
X.
I didn't even think
Moira.
about that.
Uh-huh.
And then we get the
Um,
full extended timeline that we got to see because they've been giving us timelines year 1 of Moira. She met her husband, died in a plane crash, whatever, and they keep going through all the ones. And in the previous ones, it would show her 9th life is just like still kind of ongoing. It's like the longest of all the lives, and we didn't know that we were actually I mean, I didn't know that we were actually watching that life unfold here. I thought this one that we were seeing was a future version of life 10. But was I the only one thinking that, or did most normal people, comic book readers, already know that?
I thought I don't want to say I thought that, but I thought a few different things, but that's the one that I was going with, because based off of the fact that it's not technically reincarnation she experiences, is more like a Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, it could be Groundhog's Day, but it seems to be moving along. So I think this is the one that, I feel like this is going to continue, and to see it end, that's Jonathan Hickman saying, well, hey, you're not telling the story. I'm telling the story. You're following along. I want to say this quote from Apocalypse, and then I want to say why I stopped you and asked you, is he really taking the L? Is he dead? So Apocalypse says, and should forever end, let me die in battle, surrounded by my fallen enemies, with blood on my sword. Like, again,
Wow.
such a great quote from Apocalypse. But this is what I want to say. Now, you put a quote like this at the end of the book, and this is someone talking about how they want to end. This is an immortal being talking about, should forever end, should I end? This is how I want to end. We didn't see the body. The last thing we saw was Nimrod with his hands on Apocalypse's head. I am under the impression that Apocalypse does not die, but Nimrod takes him and ultimately uses him as a weapon for the continuation of that timeline, which might roll into another one we will see, because it doesn't say the timeline ended. It says it ended the 9th life of Moira X. So this
Oh, this
timeline could,
power is so
yeah.
complicated
Your brain gotta
because
grow a
just
little bit,
because
Corey.
Moira dies in these other timelines doesn't mean they just all black out, and it's over. Like those timelines those lives or those worlds probably still continue. So
Right, and based off of what you just said, that's why I believe, because this is Moira's book. I've come to the conclusion that this Powers of 10 is Moira's book, because she's the only one that truly it like, and it's funny, it's 10, it's X, and it's the X gene, but she's the only one that has the power of 10. She's the one that gets 10 lives. This is her book. And remember, each life she remembers what happened in the last one, and we just saw the end of the ninth life. So her 10th life, which is the one I believe is going on in House of X, because we haven't seen her there yet. And that's the one that has the biggest change, where it's like, okay, Professor X and such is on the same page and all that. I believe that's the one. That's the reason why they had to put the crystal in her. The crystal, remember, was just information. She just absorbed it. And then Wolverine killed her. So the 10th Moira can get that information from Nimrod and take it back.
oh no, hold on. So
Powers of 10.
so I'm thinking now this got me thinking, and maybe you could debunk this theory easily, but
Uh-huh.
you know how we have year zeros, year
Exponent
10,
2,
100.
exponent 3,
I
yeah, and
feel
each
like
one
they're
is
all
10.
working. I think what's
Hmm.
going to happen at the end of this is that they're all working backwards.
Maybe.
And we're going to see like that um maybe this ascension storyline that we got at the end of book 2 is going to, when that resolves, it's going to be justify what happens in the one before that and before that and before that. And when we get the X-Men 1 book that you kind of mentioned at the beginning, it's going to take place from this year 0 where, we saw Xavier talking to Moira at the park.
I agree with that. The only tweak in my mind, because I say keep on to that, because I think you're on to something. The only tweak in my mind that I would make is basically this whole thing it is gonna wrap back around, but I think it's gonna be the cause of where the mutant X gene even comes from.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because that if you like, not that I've been reading every single X-Men comic book, because most of them have sucked, but I have been keeping up with with the storylines and the timelines, and Hickman has been consolidating a lot of canon that has been screwy and that contradicted itself. So ultimately, if you're gonna wrap up all that canon and that's your whole thing, then I'm thinking the biggest rap that you can do is just talk, is like take all these people, and if you're all the way in the future and the future leads to the end and we already seen humans in the Adam and Eve Garden of Eden type thing, then I'm thinking you're gonna wrap the whole thing around and show how the mutant X gene even came to be. And that's gonna be the start. You're gonna restart the whole thing
Oh,
from the
another
mutant
level.
X gene. Yeah.
Dude, this is a great book, and this is exactly the type of writing and storytelling you needed to revive something like the X-Men. I'm still completely hooked on this comic book series. As far as I'm concerned, it's easily the best line I've ever read. Um, and I mean, I'm not super well read on the comic books, but by a large margin, I'm actually excited about the X-Men. And not even just for Powers of X and House of X, like you were saying, like, I think I'm hooked on whatever comes after and after that, and I wanna see movies, and I wanna see cartoons, like, I'm 100% invested back in the X-Men, more so than I've ever been, even back when the cartoon was around.
I agree. This is why Jonathan Hickman is one of my favorite writers. This is a pivotal and foundational story for the X-Men. I thought it was hyperbole, because most marketing is when they showed that scene of Moira X like telling Xavier to read her mind, and they said this is the most important scene in X-Men history. I I believe that now,
Yeah.
and I see where it's going, and I do believe it is coming around full circle, because Jonathan Hickman is a long form storyteller who respects continuity, respects the characters, and a master storyteller. So please, guys, if you're just tuning in just to listen to this podcast, I really hope that you're buying this book and reading along. It's apparent that also what springs out of this and what does go into the X-Men books and the Marauders books and Excalibur that spin off of this, all of that stuff is ultimately going to leak over into the MCU. And in 5 years, when Kevin Feige said would be about the timetable that we see the X-Men show up, I believe that the reading that we're doing now, it's going to heavily take from. They've already sampled Jonathan Hickman's work in Endgame and Infinity War. His name was in the credits. It's already there. I've seen actual panels taken out of his book and put into the movie in lines. Follow along, get ready, make sure you stick with us. Video Game Bang. Watch the normal show every Wednesday and every Saturday. Tune in to see Webb and Emma and heck, Corey, and we have actually Nexi on there quite a bit as well. Just break down different stuff in the nerd world. They talked about a little bit about the Sony and MCU thing. So all of that stuff gets covered, but almost most importantly, go down to Oblivion Comics and Coffee if you're in Sacramento. Say the code word, "Tsetse Fly." That's not it. That was a Ari Gold entourage joke. Say the secret word, Video Game Bang or VGB. You get the code sticker and you're gonna get a discount off of your purchase. So one more time, thank you to Oblivion Comics and Coffee for sponsoring this podcast and making it happen. That is Corey Vincent, aka Mr. What's Up Pizzas. My name is Skip, aka Skip and Tosh, and we are the Krakoacast. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.